the most stressed out I've ever been. Like when the babies.
Oh my God! Yes.
Make it to the.
Yeah.
Oh, too much.
There was. Oh yeah. There was like that little cartoon. I can't remember who did it. Was like nature specials today. You know, here is the baby iguana. It's like it is being fed by a snake. You would now do anything in your power to save the baby iguana. And it was like that is absolutely true.
It's so true. So true. That's how I felt like with the planet Earth when the T-Rex is swimming and then like Moses was.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Make it. Just come on, little guy.
Right. So, bring this mic up a little bit. I'm just going to use my regular talking voice for a little bit. Good morning, Galapagos.
Good morning.
I'm so glad we have so many scholars here today. And we also have Jefferson High School with us today. Please answer your questions or ask your questions in the chat. The forum will be that the three speakers will introduce themselves. And they'll tell you what they do. And then you're going to get to ask questions, both online as well as I'll be passing a microphone so you can ask really good questions. So be thinking of your questions in your head. And the speakers know that this means really cool or awesome. You guys like it, right? Is that what this means? So you can do that. They know that. Okay? All right, Josh.
All right. Well, welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Bergen Museum and our 2023 PaleoFest event. So this is our 25th PaleoFest. So 25 years of putting this event together, and it's really unique for a museum of this size and a town of this size to put on an event like this. So thank you very much for coming out, for joining us online. And we're just going to kind of talk a little bit about what paleontology is, what we do. I'm going to introduce the speakers. We'll give a little, they'll each tell a little bit about themselves, and then we're just going to talk paleo. And you guys have questions, you can ask us whatever you want, and we'll answer them. So to my right, I have Callie Moore. She comes to us from Missoula, Montana. She's collections manager at the University of Montana, and I'll let you.
So as a collections manager, I call myself a fossil librarian. So what that means is I basically do what book librarians do for books, but for fossils. So I keep them all organized and numbered and accessible so researchers can come and actually check out fossils to study them. I also am a co-host and content consultant for a YouTube channel called PBS Eons. Do I have any Eons fans in that? Okay, that's okay. It might be a little old for you guys, but soon you'll watch them, I'm sure. And then I also just published a children's book called Tales of the Prehistoric World, all about prehistoric life and cool discoveries and the people that found them. And I'm super excited to be talking to you guys today.
And to my left, Dr. Thomas Holtz, coming to us from the University of Maryland.
Hi, so I'm Dr. Tom Holtz. I'm a dinosaur paleontologist, and that actually, it's not all paleontologists work on dinosaurs. Most people in the field don't. They work on other types of animals or plants or microorganisms, but I actually work on dinosaurs. In fact, I work on tyrannosaurs. So I work on T-Rex and its kin, its relatives. And I also, because I'm at a university, I just don't do research, I also teach. So I teach kids older than you guys, but and I teach not just about paleontology, but I also teach about geology, so the history of the Earth and how we understand it. I also teach about climate change, so the modern changes going on and what they mean and what they might mean for our future and what we could do about it. And I like, although I work mostly on dinosaurs, I love all sorts of fossil organisms, and I teach about all sorts of fossil organisms.
And I am Josh Matthews. I am the director of paleontology here at Berkeley. So I run the digs out to Montana and Utah every summer. So if you guys get a chance to see Jane and Homer yet upstairs, the fossils, the dinosaurs.
Did you see the T-Rex?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Jane.
That's Jane, and then the Triceratops is Homer. So I was able to help dig that up several years ago and put it on exhibits. So we're here to talk about all things paleontology. So you guys know what paleontology is?
Yep.
What is it? Just shout it out.
It's when you work fossils.
Yes. Yes, fossils. So most of us typically think, when you think of fossils, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs, exactly. Everybody loves dinosaurs, right? But paleontology is actually the study of all of past life. So it's not just dinosaurs. It's the mammoths and mastodons to little
Did you see a
tiny.
mammoth in our lobby?
Yeah, I see those things. They were crazy. It's amazing.
Yeah,
Yes,
right.
it's incredible. But it also includes teeny tiny things like, do you guys ever get allergies? In the sneezing all the time, you get pollen in your nose and you sneeze. Pollen is from plants, and that stuff fossilizes too. Actually, it fossilizes really well. So you can't see it with your eye; it's microscopic. But like out in Montana, when we're digging up these dinosaurs, I can take a chunk of rock and we can process that in a special way, and we can see the fossil pollen there, which allows us to reconstruct what the environment was, the different trees, the different plants that were living back then. So paleontology incorporates all of life on Earth, not just the dinosaurs. In our case, we study the dinosaurs. Kelly studies different areas of paleontology. So we all work together though to build on each other's research and try to get an idea of what the Earth looked like before we were here in different environments and across the globe. So. Let's just open it up to questions. What do you guys want to know about paleontology?
I want to know what paleontology is. About it.
More about what paleontologists do.
So paleontologists do a lot. Basically, you can what's your favorite animal? A camel? Did you say camel? That's a good one.
Yeah.
Because camels actually evolved here in North America, which is awesome because basically anything that you love about our modern world today, you can study in the ancient past. So you can study ancient camels, you could study ancient pollen, like Josh was saying, you could study ancient cats, you could study ancient platypus, you can really study anything. But what's cool about paleontology is it's actually kind of two fields combined almost. So geology and paleontology. So you have to understand the rocks to be able to find the fossils, but then you also have to understand biology to understand the fossils and be able to be like, oh, that's a humerus or that's a femur. So paleontology is a huge field and you basically can study anything you want. And it's really old.
And
So can you guys explain, like you did in the other session, what do you mean by study? And what does it mean to do research? And how does that translate for someone that's maybe never done that?
sure. So we go out there into the rocks and we dig up fossils, or we go into museum collections and find fossils that were found by someone else before. And when you find them out there in the field, they don't have labels, and we don't exactly know what they are. And so one of the things we do when we say we study them is we try to identify them and classify them. And the way to do that is, you take your lower jawbone, you figure out, oh, this looks like a lower jawbone. I have a horned dinosaur. And you go, but what horned dinosaur? And you got to go and you got to compare it. So you go and you look at drawings, or even better, the actual fossils that someone else has found before. And eventually you might say, I'll look at this part and this part and this part. This is just like other triceratops. So this has to be the lower jawbone of a triceratops. Or you might say, it's kind of like a triceratops here, but kind of like a styracosaurus here, and this part's totally different. Maybe I found something entirely new, a brand new species. So identification, that's one thing that we study. But putting a name on something is good, but that's just the start. We want to know how these animals and plants lived. So what we could do is things like, you can take measurements, with your rulers or calipers or whatever on these bones, and then do some math. I know it's scary, but we use a lot of math, and figure out like how strong the bite might have been, or how fast the animal might have been, or how long it took to grow from a little egg to a great big dinosaur. And that would help us know more about what these things were like when they were alive.
And kind of dovetailing off of that, as paleontologists, we study extinct animals, right? Dinosaurs, for the most part, are gone. They're dead. They're no longer here. There's no T-Rex roaming around at all. So how do we know how they moved, how they go together? Well, we use modern animals today to help us inform us about animals that lived in the past. So you can study a cheetah, you can study a deer, you can study a human. If you think about our bones, so in our upper arm, we have one bone here, right? In our lower arm, we actually have two bones. You can't tell, there's a bunch of muscle and tissue covering it, but there's actually two bones in here. In your wrists, there's a bunch of really little ones. And then in your hand, there's a bunch of long ones. And then your fingers are made up of a bunch of little smaller ones. And then in the same thing in your, there's, 1, 2, 3. And then your leg's the same way. Your thigh, your upper leg bone is one bone. Your lower leg, your shin, there's two bones. Your ankle, a bunch of little ones. And then your foot, a bunch of long ones. So most animals, vertebrate animals, so vertebrates are animals with backbone. So if you feel the back of your neck or your back, you feel the little bumps, that's your spine. That's your spinal column. That's your vertebrae. So vertebrate animals have spines. Like other things that are invertebrates, like jellyfish. Jellyfish don't have bones. They're little squishies. Those are called invertebrates. It means they don't have vertebrae. But all vertebrates tend to have most of them tend to have a similar body plan. So you can look at a cat. A cat arm has one bone, two bones, a bunch of little ones, and longer ones. A dog has one bone, two bones, a bunch of little ones, and then long ones. Most animals are like that. So we can look at modern animals that live today and compare them to animals we find in the rock record, and to get an idea how they move and what they look like. So it's a very big field, and a number of subfields, little different things you can study about each little thing. Like we study dinosaurs. Kelly studies fish. Some people study trilobites. You can find trilobites around here. There's just a number of different things. Trilobites are like, you ever see those roly-polies? You touch them, they turn to a ball? Yeah, well, pill bug. They're not pill bugs, but they're kind of, they resemble those. You can find them in rocks around here. They have a bunch of segments, and sometimes you can find them curled up in balls too. Yeah.
How do it feel being a paleontologist?
How does it feel?
It feels great.
It does.
It's the best.
Adventurous. You get to see a lot of cool places, and they get a lot of cool animals.
Have you found T-Rex?
We found Jane upstairs a number of years ago, but we find lots of T-Rex bones and teeth. So dinosaurs shed their teeth throughout their whole life. So one falls out, another one comes back in. Do we know any animals that do that today?
Sharks!
Sharks! Yes, sharks. If a shark's tooth falls out, another one comes in behind it. Well, dinosaurs do that all the time. So T-Rex, especially being a predator, when they're grabbing prey, a lot of times those teeth will break off and they'll be deposited. So we find lots of shed teeth from T-Rex. And we do find more bones. We did find another T-Rex called Petey several years ago. It's not as complete as Jane, but we do have more.
Hi, I'm Scott Williams. I'm the director of the exhibits at the Museum of the Rockies. I used to work here, also part of the paleontology team at Museum of the Rockies.
He was pivotal in the Jane expedition. That brought Jane back to Rockford.
Why do we find them? Because if we don't find more fossils, we don't have a job. No, the reason we look for more fossils because there's always new questions. Every time we get an answer, that actually leads to more questions. So we keep on looking for new fossils so that we can hopefully try to answer those questions and make us think about new ideas so we can go out and look for more fossils to answer those questions.
Oh, that is a great question. So it depends on where you're working and what you're working on. So our expedition, we work in two different areas. We work in Montana and we work out in Utah. So in Montana, when we're doing field work, we literally just hike around the buttes in the hills, and we look for bones coming out. If we find something, we use things like these. These are called awls. They're just little picks, basically. And the rock isn't super hard rock where you need a hammer and chisel. It's pretty soft. You can dig these, you pop these in, and you can remove some rock a little bit at a time. We also use things like, pardon? Oh, yeah. And then we use rock picks like this, or rock hammers, Out in Utah, the rocks we use are much harder. So we actually use something called an air scribe. This is an air scribe, and it's basically a mini jackhammer. So we run it by a compressed air, and it basically goes back and forth, and it chips away at the rock so we can get to the bones. So that's what we use out in the field. When we bring those bones back to the lab, we use a series of these things, similar tools in the lab, only smaller and more delicate to clean the bones.
Have you guys ever got your teeth cleaned?
Yeah.
Like those little dental picks? We use dental picks a lot. Like every time I go to my dentist to have my teeth cleaned, I'm like, hey, let me see all of your dull dental picks. And he gives me the dental picks so then I can use them in our lab. If you guys don't do that, you should do that. It's a great way to get free dental picks. But anyways, we use dental picks a lot. So even tools from other jobs work real great for paleontology.
And in fact, you can keep, that's where you're cleaning up the specimens. When you're studying them, you can use all types of equipment, almost anything. So from, like, I don't know if you ever had to go to the doctor and had a CT scan. So you lie down on a bed and you go through this machine, it's and it's taking pictures of your inside. Well, we could do that with fossils, and that way we could see what's inside a bone or a skull or something without having to break it apart. Or we could use chemistry, So you can use things, also the chemical equipment, and analyze the stuff it's made out of. And that can tell us things like what temperatures the bodies of the animals were, or who was eating what kind of stuff. So if you can come up with a piece of equipment, if you can think of a tool that can answer a question about a fossil, you can use it in paleontology.
Yeah, and the technology that's coming out now is, like Dr. Holt said, with the CT scans is incredible, to the point where when we can take a skull of a dinosaur, we can run it through a CT scanner. And again, he said it's taking pictures throughout this whole skull. And depending on the density of the rock and the bone itself, we can, for instance, the brain case, we may not be able to see the brain of a dinosaur with our eyes, but when we run it through this machine, the computer, we can digitally pull it out and we can look at what the brain of a T-Rex would have looked like by not even seeing it with our eyes. We can see it in a CT scan, and we can figure out what's going on in these animals. So new technology every day is giving us really cool new areas of opportunity to study these animals.
What?
How do you know there's fossils?
How do we know there's fossils?
That's a good question. There's a couple different ways. One is, for example, right here in the Rockford area, if you've ever driven by a road cut and you've looked and you've seen rocks that have different layers, those are types of limestones around here. And we know, because we've done a lot of work on geology and we know the different types of rock formations, that those rocks that are around here were formed like 450 million years ago, when this part of Illinois was south of the equator and covered by a warm tropical sea, kind of like the Bahamas. So the fossils that you'll find in those limestones aren't dinosaurs, they're not mammoth, but you will find things like shells, clams, brachiopods, these things called trilobites that kind of look like little crab things. Now, in different parts of the United States, you have different formations that have different fossils in them. And we're lucky that we've had the last 200 years to map all of these geologic formations. So in Montana, if you want to find a T-Rex, who would want to find a T-Rex? Just curious. A few of you would like to find a T-Rex? There's a few areas in Montana, in eastern Montana, that have the right formation that's the right age, about 66 to 67 million years ago. Because that's when T-Rex lived, that's when Triceratops lived, that's when Ankylosaurus lived, that's when Edmontosaurus lived. And you walk around these formations, which are made of mudstones and sandstones and shales. And if you're lucky, some of those bones are eroding out. They weather, they freeze, they thaw, they break apart. Oh, awesome. Here's a perfect example of some of the fossils you find in Rockford. So here's are some of those shells. These are brachiopods and clams, and there might be some trilobite parts in there. But if you go looking around here in northern Illinois, these are the kind of fossils you're going to find. 450 million years ago, long before there were any dinosaurs, long before there were any dinosaurs, long before there were any of us. And when you're in Montana and you're looking for Tyrannosaurus Rex, the rocks are a lot different. They're softer. They're not really hard rocks like this. They are rocks that were formed 66 million years ago when rivers and streams and lakes and ponds were putting down sediment. Basically, all the little clay particles and dirt particles and whatnot made that formation. And so the bones weather out over time. And you just walk around and you look for them, and when they come out of the rock, they're broken up. They don't look very nice. You kind of go, ugh. Which actually a lot of us do, like, ugh, should we even bother collecting that? But once you start digging into the hill with those tools that Josh showed, maybe you get lucky and their bone keeps going into the hill, and then that bone's connected to another bone, connected to another bone, or maybe there's a jumble of bones, and then you'll start the process of excavating the whole thing. So that's kind of how we do it. We figure out which age of rock, which formation, what we're looking for, and then we start walking around and we just look with our two eyes. That's how technical that is.
Another question? Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting, showing them travel lights.
Oh, that's awesome, yeah.
How do you know about fossils?
How do we know about fossils? Well, we go out there, we pick them up, we look at them. We read and listen to the work of other people, because no one of us knows everything about fossils. So we learn more about it by talking to other scientists, by talking to just amateurs who collected the fossils, about where they found them and so forth, by reading the new papers that come out when people write about their new discoveries, and by reading old books where we look at old discoveries and say, hey, these old people, sometimes they make big mistakes and sometimes they got it pretty good. So we're always learning new things, and it's important when you're a paleontologist or a scientist in general, or actually any sort of person, to keep on learning. There's always new information coming out. We always want to get more discoveries.
So we've got an online question, and this one's going to be fun. I hope everyone takes a turn. What is something you believe could exist in the fossil record that we just haven't found yet?
Ooh, that's nice.
That's a good one.
Do you guys understand that question?
No.
The person was asking, what's something that you believe existed, but is probably now extinct? You think it might be out there, but we just haven't found it yet. So what's something maybe you're expecting or hoping to find?
Maybe a new one?
Yeah, a new one. It would have to be a new one.
What about
Either that or like, so we haven't found a T-Rex nest. It obviously had to be out there because they had babies.
Yep.
And we haven't found one yet. So I always tell, when I give tours at my museum, I always tell the kids, if you want to be the most famous paleontologist that has ever lived, find a T-Rex nest with babies in it. And you're done. Your career is over. You can just roll with that for the rest of your life if you find the T-Rex nest with baby T-Rexes in it.
oh,
You're set.
That'd be even better.
Here's something that might exist, but no one has ever found it, would be a flightless pterodactyl.
Ooh.
Because there are, pterodactyls and other pterosaurs, the flying reptiles, most of them fly. But just like today, there are some flightless birds, things like ostriches and emus and so forth, that have lost the ability to fly. There's always the possibility that some pterosaur, maybe on an island, or maybe just for some other reason, gave up the ability to fly and became mostly just a four-legged running animal. We haven't found it, but it could exist. And in fact, going all the way back to the 1800s, there was a British scientist who thought he found one because he found a vertebrae, a backbone like this big, with all sorts of hollow air chambers in it. And at that time, the only ancient creatures that were known that had hollow chambers in their vertebrae were pterosaurs, or flying reptiles. But it turned out he was one of the first people to find a bone of a sauropod dinosaur. And because sauropod, the giant long-necked dinosaurs like Apatosaurus and Diplodocus and Brachiosaurus, they also have those holes in their bone, both the holes in their neck bones and backbones. But because no one had found them before, what on earth could this bone be? Their best guess was a giant flightless pterosaur.
I think it exists, so it's not exactly on par with the question, but some dinosaurs, a lot of dinosaurs we don't actually know. We have their bones, but we don't have the soft tissue. We don't exactly know what they look like, some of the structures. But some of these horned dinosaurs, like Triceratops or Styracosaurus, I would love to find a skull that has soft tissue preservation. What's kind of cool about horns in general, like if you think about bison, you guys ever seen a bison or a buffalo or an antelope? Have you ever seen a pronghorn antelope? They have horns that come up and they fork. However, those are just sheaths. They're basically a keratin, like your fingernails, that covers little bony nubs on the top of their skulls. So typically that doesn't preserve. So if we were to find an antelope skull in the fossil record that we didn't know what it looked like today, we would have never really known what those horns look like because the actual horny part doesn't preserve. Now, same thing could happen to any of these horned dinosaurs. When you look at a Triceratops, that horn has all kinds of blood vessels on it. So that would have had a sheath of keratin over top of it, much like a cat's claw. You ever trim your cat's claws or your dog's claws, and you got to be careful because you don't want to hit the bone and hurt them. Kind of same thing was happening with dinosaurs. They had a keratin sheath over top of these horns, but we kind of think we know what they look like. We probably know what they look like, but what if they were doing some really bizarre things that we just don't know about, and we never will. So if you could find a mummified Triceratops skull and see what that looked like, it'd be really cool. We do find dinosaurs that have soft tissue preservation. It's just very rare.
I think that there is an entire group of dinosaurs that we don't have any evidence for, but likely existed, and they are montane dinosaurs.
Yes.
Dinosaurs that lived in the mountains.
Yeah.
And since we live in the mountains, and we get to see animals today that live in the mountains, bighorn sheep and mountain goats, elk will even go up in the mountains. We know that there are mammals that live today that excel in living in basically high altitude areas, big mountains that have thrust up. There had to have been dinosaurs. Were there dinosaurs that were adapted like bighorn sheep and mountain goats from jumping around from rock to rock to rock? Was there raptors that were adapted for doing that, kind of like snow leopards over in Asia? Undoubtedly, but we don't have any fossils to show us that, because typically dinosaur fossils are found in low-lying areas where there's rivers and streams and ponds and lakes and things like that. And you don't get those up in the mountains. Everything up in the mountains flows down to those low-lying areas. So that's why those dinosaurs get buried quickly, and we find more of them in that kind of setting. But undoubtedly there were mountain dinosaurs, a whole fauna, a whole population. That's a good question.
How many dinosaurs are there?
How many dinosaurs are there? Well, if we talk about the dinosaurs of the Mesozoic era, so the dinosaurs of the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous, there's something like a little over 1,000 named species so far. But we're naming about 40 to 50 new species every year. And there are big parts of the world, or big sections of time, where we don't have fossils from the Mesozoic, from the age of dinosaurs. So there were almost certainly dinosaur species whose fossils we've never found and may never find. So we don't know exactly, we'll probably never know exactly how many species there were, but we keep on finding new ones. So the best answer is more than we know right now.
How many bones are in a T-Rex?
Bones. I never counted that.
We have like, what, over two? Well, we have different.
Yeah.
Well, so humans, it's kind of fun because we have more bones when we're little than
Yeah.
we do as adults. But it's like 200 for a human.
And you're gonna add tail vertebrae.
And then you gotta
Yeah.
add tail vertebrae.
And chevrons.
Chevrons.
Yeah.
Oh
A
man.
bunch.
What? You've never
I never bothered to check.
Australia.
And Australia, and then brain cases. Brain cases, all these little bones. Anyway, yeah, a lot. Well,
Well, you think of your skull alone. People think your skull is one bone. Your skull is actually made up of a lot of smaller
Yeah.
bones that are, as you get older, they fuse together. If you look at a human skull, you'll see all these little.
it's like,
Yeah.
this is just one bone of Jane. It's this, the bone between your canine and the back of your teeth. That's this bone in Jane. So you have this one on this side, and the left, not that right, okay, and the one on the right. It's a mirror image, and then a bunch of the little bones at the front of the snout, and then the nose bones on top of that, and the little eye bones, the things that protect the eye up front where the tear duct is, and then the little horn behind. There's lots of little bones up
You
there.
have homework now.
Yeah, exactly.
You're gonna have to go count the
Go
bones.
count them all, yeah.
There's even little bones in your ears.
That's right, yeah. Well, dinosaurs would have the stapes.
Oh, okay.
So they would
we
have
didn't
one
have
bone.
those.
Yeah, we mammals have 3 little ear bones. Dinosaurs would have 1 in each ear.
Have you found a Stegosaurus?
Have we found them? We found parts of them out in our. We have a dinosaur quarry out in southern Utah, which is in the late Jurassic period. That's when Stegosaurus lived. So in that quarry, we have found a few bones to Stegosaurus. We haven't found any of the plates yet along its back, but we're hoping.
How many bones is in a Tyrannosaurus Rex?
Yeah, we were trying to count that up.
We think between 200 and 300
He wants
probably.
to know Oviraptor.
Oh,
Oviraptor, it's close to the same as Tyrannosaurus.
Probably.
A little fewer because it's got a shorter tail. But
Maybe
yeah.
if you guys have time, when you go back out to Jane, try to count all of the bones.
Oh.
You're gonna be there for a while.
How did you become paleontologist?
How do we become
Ooh, that's a great. I think we should all do our story. Yeah.
Start.
I think everybody becomes a paleontologist slightly differently, from different backgrounds. I became a paleontologist because at your age, I was very interested and excited about the natural world, everything around us. And I would stop at those road cuts here in Northern Illinois. I'd make my dad stop the car, and I'd go out and I'd go collect these kind of fossils because you can find them. And so I became very interested in paleontology, and he would read me books and then take me to museums. He took me to Burpee Museum. It was in the building next door. And then we'd go over to Chicago to the Field Museum. And then pretty much any road trip we would go on, my mom would try to find a museum anywhere in the area, and we'd go there. And so when I got older and I got into high school, I took courses like earth science and chemistry and stuff that's not so fun. But there's some courses that you have to take if you're going. No, it is no way.
Unless you like chemistry.
Unless you like chemistry.
Don't count out the chemistry.
And so when I got into college, I took more of the same courses, but I had been volunteering at the local museum, which is Burpee. So I always suggest, if there's a museum that you really like and it's in your area and you want to get a taste of museum work and or paleontology, you should talk to the folks there about volunteering. And so, you do that, you take some courses. I never finished my degree. I was like 20-some credits short of a bachelor's, but I was working here, and I never formally finished, but I got to do field work, go out to Montana, go to Utah, go to Wyoming, help put up some exhibits here. And then I moved to another museum where I did much of the same. And now I actually teach a course at the university, I teach college kids how to prepare fossils, how to make cradles, how to preserve them, things like that. So that's one avenue: fossil preparation, fossil conservation, collections management, things like that, where you get to be a little more hands-on with the material. You get to go out in the field and find it. There are several different ways to get into paleontology. I know people who are in paleontology who are exceptional artists.
Yeah.
They are great artists. They do life restorations, they'll do line drawings of skeletons, and they take art and they take paleontology and they wrap them together. So there's not just one way to do it. The rest of the folks will tell you the same thing.
Who here has seen Land Before Time? Anybody? That might be.
I need my guinea pig after
Okay, yeah, this is a bit of an elder millennial movie, but that's what got it started for me. So in this movie, there's some baby dinosaurs and they go on an adventure, and one of them is a triceratops, and her name's Sarah, and she's very headstrong, and she's stubborn, and she's brave, and I was like, I see you. And so I really identified with Sarah, and I really liked dinosaurs your age. About what grade are you guys in? Second. Okay, so right around second or third grade, I declared I wanted to be a paleontologist. And I stuck with it. I wavered a little bit in high school. I was going to be a biology teacher for a while, but then I came back to it. But I always liked the museum side. I like to be able to go where the public can't go. So go into the collection and see all the stuff that they have behind the scenes. And so when I grew up, I knew I wanted to work in a collection. I wanted to be around all the fossils. These guys are specialists. They have their little thing that they study, and they study it to death, and that's what they do. I wanted to study all of paleontology. I wanted to know about the entire history of life. And so I wanted to work in a collection that had things that were over 1 billion years old and things that were just a few thousand years old. And that's what I got. And so at the University of Montana, our oldest specimen is 2.75 billion with a B years old. And our youngest specimen is only about 9,000 years old. But it covers 20 different countries, and I get to work on basically the entire history of life instead of specializing on just one tiny thing. So I'm from the museum world. I like to be in the background in the collection.
She said tiny, by the way.
I know, yeah.
I had a similar path when I was your age. I loved dinosaurs. Land Before Time, again, was one of those movies I watched multiple times. And back when we were kids, you get little hand puppets at Pizza Hut. Yeah, well, each one of the little dinosaurs. And then when I was, 14 years old, a little movie named Jurassic Park came out, which really solidified my love for paleontology. But when I left high school, I didn't have an avenue, a route to become a paleontologist. I went to college and I studied biology and geology, and it wasn't until my college hired a paleontologist that I got to work in it a little bit. I worked on animals like the brachiopods in front of Scott here. And then after I graduated there, I went to graduate school to get a higher degree, and I went a completely different route. I wasn't working in paleontology at all, and it actually wasn't until I started volunteering here at Burpee where I started getting back into paleontology. So I worked for Scott as a volunteer fossil preparator, and then I got to go on an expedition to Montana, and that's kind of how my path led to where I'm at now. So as Scott mentioned, when you guys get older, if you get a chance, if you're interested in paleontology or natural history in general, if there's a museum around you, like the Burpee, volunteer.
There is.
There is. Yeah. A volunteer, come in and help out.
In my case, when I was even younger than you, I found out about dinosaurs, and so I decided I was going to be one. In fact, I was going to be T-Rex, because if you're going to be a dinosaur, you might as well be the king. But then I found out, my parents told me I couldn't actually become a dinosaur, so I decided I would stick with it, and I would become a dinosaur researcher. So I would study dinosaurs. And unlike, I think, a lot of people, I actually stuck with the decision I made when I was 3. So eventually, in high school, I took a lot of classes in science, and then I went to college knowing I wanted to do paleontology. So I studied in geology, and that's where all the paleontologists were at my college. And then went on to grad school to get what's called a doctorate. So that's why I'm Dr. Holtz. And I studied on studied dinosaurs and other fossil organisms, but I did my main research on my favorites, which are carnivorous dinosaurs. And now I teach kids, so it turns around. I teach older kids than you. I teach college students. So.
How do you know if the dinosaur is an herbivore or a carnivore?
Great question. And yeah, so the first thing you do is you look at its chompers, you look at its teeth, because when you're going to eat something, the shape of your teeth will make it either easier to slice up meat or to chop up plants, or a little bit of both. And that's one of the first things we could look at. And that's, was this, like, what do you guys think? Do you think this guy ate meat or ate plants?
Meat.
Meat, yeah. So these are nice slicing teeth? For meat, exactly. But then if you had these other teeth, that might be good for shredding plants. And that's good for eating, natural salad, the plants that existed back then. Or it might be teeth. Not that many dinosaurs had teeth like this, but if you find teeth that are like our molars.
If you run your tongue along your back teeth,
Yeah.
those big flat ones back there.
Our teeth are good at eating both meat and plants. And if you look at the teeth, this is gonna be weird. If you ever look at the teeth of a pig or a bear, they actually look like our molars. And what do pigs eat? Everything. And what do bears eat? Everything, yeah. So those are the sort of clues we use to try to figure out what a creature ate if we can't actually see it eating, which in the case of fossils, we typically don't see them eating.
I have another way that you can tell if something was a carnivore or an herbivore.
Okay.
Yes, you can take a look at their fossilized poop.
Yep.
Oh, bet you didn't know that was a thing, huh?
We have some right out here.
It's called, those are called coprolites. So when you go home and you talk to your family, tell them you learned all about coprolites today. We actually find fossilized poop. And sometimes that fossilized poop has stuff in it. It has chunks of bones. So if there's little bone chunks in the poop, what'd that animal eat? Meat. Other animals, right? If you look inside and there's chunks of plant and berries and other stuff like that, it ate plants. Yeah. And so far, I don't think we have found any coprolites that have a little bit of both that we know. Yeah. Okay. Where's Karen?
Not for dinosaurs, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes, not for dinosaurs, but for smaller animals, you might find little bits of like the outside of bugs, because there are some animals. They're typically small animals that make their living by eating insects and other bugs. You probably see birds flying around outside your window, going around pecking on bugs and things.
How many balls are in a pterodactyl?
Pterodactyl.
There's a bunch of.
A lot.
A bunch. Yep, a lot.
A lot. I've never counted them all.
They have a smaller cave. So
Yeah, that's right.
not all of them.
So,
How many fossils have you found in this year?
ooh.
This year.
Well,
Is
I haven't
cold
been.
right now?
Yeah, it's easy
There's
to
a
be
lot of
zero.
snow in Montana
Yeah.
at the moment.
I've not been
Let's
outside.
do 1 year from today, so it includes the
Oh.
season. Okay.
Well, when we find lots of, in Montana where we work, we find a lot of, not just dinosaurs, we find all the little critters. So dinosaurs are cool, right? Love the dinosaurs, but when dinosaurs were around, there were little animals underneath their feet. There were lizards, there were snakes, there were mammals, there were fish in the rivers, there were crocodiles. So some of our sites out in Montana will find 1,000 fossils in 1 year, just because you're looking at vertebrae, invertebrate backbones, they're teeny tiny, but in one small site you can find a bunch of them. So we find about 500 to 1,000 every summer.
We're having a side conversation follow-up on this
Okay.
because he wants to know the relationship of the Ice Age or Ice Ages to dinosaurs, and did bones freeze, right? Did you want to know that some of the dinosaurs froze too?
Okay. Well, the famous ice ages, the ice ages with the woolly mammoth and the saber-toothed cats and the giant ground sloths, those are very close to us in the history of the Earth. They started about 2.6 million years ago. And so long after T-Rex, because T-Rex and Triceratops, the last of the giant dinosaurs, they died out 66 million years ago. And the Ice Ages started about 2.6 million years ago. And technically, they're not over. Normally, an ice age, people think of ice age, they see the pictures of the glaciers, they see the woolly mammoths and so forth. They think that the world was just in a deep freeze. But really what happens in an ice age is you get these pulses of ice growing and shrinking and growing and shrinking and growing on cycles of like 100,000 years. But the last melt back of the ice, that was only, and paleontologists say only 18,000 years ago. So really, we're probably just in the warm space, the warm phase in one of these back and forth of an ice age. So that's long after the giant dinosaurs.
And so your other part of the question was, did dinosaurs get frozen in ice?
So if dinosaurs got frozen in ice, that ice melted a long time ago. There would have been some dinosaurs living in the coldest parts of the world at the time, but those still wouldn't have been as cold as the coldest parts of the world today. The Mesozoic, the age of dinosaurs, was generally a lot warmer than it was today.
You have a question?
I have something to add on.
Okay.
Cryolophosaurus, that dinosaur was actually discovered in Antarctica. So while it wasn't frozen in ice, it was found in a pretty cold area.
But that area, it was much warmer back then.
Yeah.
In Antarctica. Antarctica at the time, there were no polar ice caps. Antarctica would have been a series. Well, it was a landmass, but it was Pangea. It was still, or it was breaking up at this time. But you guys are familiar with Pangea? That's when all the continents were together as one landmass, and over time they spread out.
Probably not myself.
Probably not.
Yeah.
But Josh, didn't you work on Cryolophosaurus?
I did. I went
So-
to Antarctica and got to dig up this dinosaur, and we're in the mountains above the ice, but it's cold now. But not back then. We actually have petrified forests, so actual tree stumps you can find in Antarctica right now. Even though it's negative 40 degrees below zero, it was much warmer back during the early Jurassic.
Let me hop back to the Ice Age question real quick, since that's very important for this area.
Yeah.
You know that corn that you see out in the cornfields around here? That reason that there's so much good corn and soybeans and things like that is because we have dirt. It's called topsoil. And that was brought down 100,000 years ago by the glaciers. At one point around that time, when the glaciers were at their biggest, there was about a mile of ice, about 5,000 feet thick. And it went all the way down past the center part of Illinois. And like Dr. Holt said, that pulse that would go away and then come back. And so a lot of the rivers, a lot of the rolling hills that you see around here, the cornfields, those are all because of the glaciers coming through here hundreds of thousands of years ago.
Go check out the second floor exhibit when you get a chance.
Yeah. I have an online question that I'm going to grab. This one is, if you could choose one place in the world to dig or do research, where would you want to go?
The Gobi Desert. The Gobi Desert.
Patagonia, South America.
If it were a little safer than it is now, and currently it's not very safe, there's parts of Central Asia, like in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, where scientists back in the days when there was a Soviet Union, they found a lot of fossils there, some really cool ones from different time periods. There's not been so much work there because there's bandits and little wars and so forth going on. It's very dangerous for people to work there. And so we know that there's fossils, and they're really intriguing. There's more bones in the rock, but it's hard to get to them right now.
I got to go with Patagonia. We actually had an offer to go a couple years ago, and it didn't work out, with a famous paleontologist named Rodolfo Coria, and real good guy. And he works down in Patagonia, which is South America. It's towards the southern part of Patagonia, part of a country called Argentina. and they find some really awesome dinosaurs there that are quite a bit different than the dinosaurs that we get up here. But they do the same kind of things. You have big meat-eating dinosaurs down there called giganotosaurs, and giant sauropods, big long-necked dinosaurs like Patagotitan and Argentinosaurus that are over 100 feet long and 50 feet tall and weigh 80 tons. And there is rock down there from the early Cretaceous period. So right after Jurassic that Rodolfo and his team have been working. And those are dinosaurs that we don't know a whole lot about. It's a time period right after Jurassic where there's not too many places that have earliest Cretaceous rock. And so that, I think that's still on my bucket list of places to go.
Yeah, and if you didn't know, the Gobi Desert is in Mongolia.
Yeah.
Yes, but we have a question from the audience. Somebody is asking why the Gobi Desert?
Oh, yes. Why the Gobi Desert? So deserts are a great place to find fossils because there's no plants covering the rocks. So if you got a forest, it's really hard to see the rocks. So in a desert, you don't have to worry about that. Also, there's a bunch of cool dinosaurs that have been found there. So Protoceratops, Velociraptor, Dinocaris.
Yeah.
All some weird ones with the long, not Therizinosaurus, but similar to Therizinosaurus.
Oh, Therizinosaurus itself is from the
Oh,
Nemeds.
That's right. So Therizinosaurus is from there. I don't know. There's just a lot of really cool dinosaurs that come out of there, and I think there's more. There's more. Out
That's
there.
on my bucket list.
Yeah, me too.
Where do you find the fossils?
You find the fossils where you find the right sort of rocks. Like Scott was talking about, different spots in the world have rocks of different ages and different environments. And if it was the right time and place, if there were animals or plants that died and their bodies settled down onto the seafloor or the lake floor, or were buried by a stream, then you might have fossils. So like here, we find the fossils of creatures so far back in time that the fish don't even have jaws yet. They're going, okay. And then if you go like where I teach, it's actually in the Cretaceous. My university is built on top of the Cretaceous period. So there are a few dinosaurs that have been found near our campus and mostly plant fossils. We go out to Montana to dig from the very end of the Cretaceous, where we get T-Rex and Triceratops and Anzu and a lot of other really cool dinosaurs. So it depends upon where in the world you are as to what sort of fossils you find.
Now here in Illinois, like we mentioned that we have these types of fossils. Unfortunately, as of yet, no dinosaurs have been found in Illinois, and that's mainly because the rocks that they would have been buried in are no longer here. The rocks below our feet, if you dig through the dirt, the rock that you hit is about 450 to 470 million years old. So way before the dinosaurs. So without question, they were likely here at one point, but the rocks that they would have been preserved in are just no longer here. There are some areas in southern Illinois that the rocks are the right age, but again, it's covered with vegetation and trees and dirt, so you can't actually access the rocks. You can't see them. So there is a chance that we may find them someday, but there's just so few rocks of that right age in Illinois. Same thing in Wisconsin as well.
If you go right across the river, the Mississippi River from southern Illinois into Missouri, that's a state that's right next to us, but down in the south part of the state, there's a site where they do have dinosaurs.
Yeah.
It's called the Chronister site, and there's duck-billed dinosaurs and crocodiles and turtles. They got theropod material, yeah. So we can say, well, if there are dinosaurs just like 100 and some miles west of southern Illinois, well, there probably was dinosaurs in southern Illinois, what is now southern Illinois, during that time.
Yeah, it's like if you think about it, also, we go out to like where they're digging in Utah, they find Stegosaurus and Allosaurus and Torvosaurus. We also find Stegosaurus and Allosaurus and Torvosaurus in Portugal. So there's every reason to think that here in Illinois, or back in my home in Maryland, Stegosaurus and Allosaurus and Torvosaurus were walking around. We just don't have the right age rocks or at least the right exposures of rocks to show that they were there.
Did you show the fossils from the little black box, Josh?
Oh, no, I did not.
Let's
So,
make sure we do that before we run out of time.
yeah. So, one question we often get is, when we're out in the field, how do you tell the bone from the rock? And that the way you can, when you're looking for a while, your eye gets trained to find it. But one thing you can do is, if you want to know if it's a rock or not, is you can lick it. And if I know it sounds gross, but if it's a bone, it'll actually stick to your tongue, because all bones have little tiny pores on them, even to this day, and fossils do too. So when you stick your tongue to it, it creates suction. Those pores do, and it will stick to your tongue. If it's a regular rock, it won't. So that's if you're
Now
out.
everyone wants you to demonstrate.
How many fingers have been in this one?
Well, actually not many.
We're gonna go for it. Okay.
How do you
so
get it off?
you just pull it off. So let's try it. Let's see if it works. Yeah, it tastes like dirt.
Tastes like Montana.
Okay, I'm gonna keep this one over here. But they really stick good. I had a kid at a field site. He was probably around your guys' age, and he stuck one to his tongue, and he kept it there almost all day long. He just walked around with his tongue.
I'll pass a few chunks of these. This is real dinosaur.
The non-licked ones.
Yeah, not like
Non-licked.
pass
Yeah.
a couple around so you guys can see what.
And don't lick it either.
And kids don't lick it just
Yeah.
because it's dirty and it's been who knows where.
Yeah. I don't know, there's a little online question.
Yeah, there is another online question. We are looking for what is your favorite specific fossil specimen? And please tell us why.
I would say the Velociraptor and the Protoceratops
Oh, the fighting
locked
dinosaurs.
together. Yeah, it's a specimen where you have Velociraptor and the Protoceratops kind of locked together when they basically sand dune collapsed. It's a beautiful specimen.
Can you explain locked together?
Oh, so they were in combat. Yeah, like I think what is it? The killing claw, I think, is in the
Right, it's-
run.
Gross.
So,
The
so
throat?
yeah, you got,
The Protoceratops is biting the arm.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really cool. My,
So they're fighting.
Yeah,
This is for the I know what it looks like. I'm asking to help clarify.
yeah, they were locked in battle, so they were fighting, and then I think the
Sand
sand
dune
collapsed.
collapse, yeah.
on top of them. Yep.
my favorite, and I'm not doing this just to suck up. It's like asking to choose which of your kids are your favorite. So I would say I have very fond thoughts about both Jane and Sue, which are two different specimens of Tyrannosaurus. They're both pretty complete. I mean, Jane's about 50% of the bones are there. Sue's even more. Sue's something like close to 90%. And they tell us a whole lot about what Tyrannosaurus rex, who's my favorite dinosaur, is like. And especially how Tyrannosaurus changed over time. And since I research Tyrannosaurs, and I'm particularly interested in how they lived, their ecology, and how they moved, those are like two really good glimpses of different phases of life when they acted very different from each other.
This is really hard. I'm gonna kind of cheat on the question and kind of pick more of a locality. So in China, I believe, they found these really weird bone beds. So a bone bed is where you just have a bunch of jumble of bones. And most of the time you see them flat out. So just like on the ground, if you threw out a bunch of bones on the ground, they'd be out all horizontal on the ground. Well, they found these weird ones that were about 3 feet wide by about 3 feet deep. And all the bones were vertical. And they're like, what is going on? What is going on? So they studied the rocks, they studied the bones, and it turns out a giant sauropod dinosaur walked across a muddy, squishy swamp, and it left huge footprints. Because again, about 1,000, I don't know, tonnage wise, like 75 tons or something like that, walking across some squishy ground, makes some huge footprints. And then water filled in those footprints. And then you had these tiny little feathered dinosaurs just doing their little dinosaur thing, walking across the surface, and they fell into the footprints. And they couldn't get out, and they died. And so we have a sauropod that accidentally created these amazing bone beds with all of these little feathered dinosaurs in it that died Death traps, death footprint traps. That's probably
Yeah.
my favorite.
That's
That was a
yeah.
good one. Yeah.
Well, I have to go with the one that's just basically right above us over there. And that, well, you go, I mean, you can't see it back there. You got to go upstairs or use your X-ray vision. It's, so Jane is my favorite because that is, you know, I was there when Jane was found, collected, brought back here, prepared, put on exhibit. So I was able to watch that specimen from the time it was discovered all the way to the time it was unveiled to everyone. And we brought in people like Tom Holtz, Tom Carr, Jack Horner, basically every expert who has ever looked at a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And as you know, Dr. Holtz mentioned, it is a nice, it's a kind of a nice bookend when you think about it. You've got one of the best preserved juvenile T-Rexes in the world right here in Rockford. And then you go 90 miles to the east of us, and you've got one of the best preserved oldest T-Rexes in the world. And it's kind of funny that Illinois has two of the best T-Rex specimens in a state that doesn't have any of its own dinosaurs. And it's, but I like to brag, and I like to rub this in our friends from the Field Museum's face from time to time. We are friends, so that we found our T-Rex. And I've said that on record before. And that helped start the paleontology program and was the catalyst for this new edition that you're sitting in. So Jane did a lot for this museum, for everybody here, brought this great team in, and that's one of the things that Burpee is well known for now. And I always like to say, and so does Kirk Johnson, who's the director of the Smithsonian, that Burpee has always and continues to bat above its average when it comes to paleontology. So anyhow, that's my favorite.
Well, at this time, we're out of time. So I want to first give a round of applause if you would join me for the one of the scientists who helped us today and answer your questions. And also, I just want to say you guys were a phenomenal audience. I am blown away all the time. You guys did such a good job. And thank you to our online friends. We appreciate you being here with us today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Josh.
All right, yeah, I just want to say the same thing. Thank you very much for coming out today. It's great to have the Galapagos here for both sessions, representing the Rockford community, and then to our online groups as well. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to come in and having a discussion with us. These are always fun to get out and talk about this with students and others who may be interested in getting involved in paleontology or science in general in the future. So paleontology it's a hook to science in general. A lot of times we think science is hard, but science is really cool. Everything is difficult in life, so don't let people tell you, oh, math is hard or chemistry is hard. Don't do it. It's all science, and it's really cool. That's how we learn about the natural world and ourselves. So thank you for coming.
So what was your question?
Well, I'm just curiosity. Do you think that there's fossils at the